The chamber was silent, yet the silence carried a weight heavier than any storm on Earth. Walls of polished obsidian reflected a cold, alien light, and the floor beneath him hummed faintly, as though the very structure were alive and aware of his presence. Cale Mercer stood at the center, his heart hammering in a rhythm that betrayed both fear and anticipation. Before him, suspended in chains of a material he didn't recognize, was the object they called only as it. A simple pronoun, yet it carried the force of an entire civilization's law. To touch it, to free it, was forbidden. To ignore it was unthinkable. Cale had been trained for discipline. Years aboard the human exploratory vessel had instilled obedience like a second skin, but this was different. This was no ordinary law, it was sacred, written into the codes of the Dominion, enforced by alien sentinels whose eyes glowed like molten metal. It was untouchable. And yet, something in Cale's chest refused to yield. Something whispered that laws were not always justice. He crouched slightly, observing the chains that bound the strange creature or object. It pulsed faintly, a rhythmic glow that seemed almost alive. Every so often, a tendril of light quivered against the restraint, as if it were trying to speak through the barriers. Cale swallowed hard. His training screamed at him to step back, to obey, to respect the rules of the Dominion. Every instinct drilled into him for years warned that even the slightest defiance could bring immediate and irreversible punishment. But the eyes of it, met his own. They were luminous, impossibly intelligent, and undeniably frightened. In that silent gaze, Cale felt a pull he could not explain. The chamber's oppressive order clashed violently with his own humanity. He knew what the law demanded, yet his conscience quaked at the thought of leaving it trapped in isolation, in chains no being should endure. "Do not approach," a voice intoned, calm, precise, almost surgically cold. It came from the sentinel above, hovering with its polished chrome appendages, each movement deliberate, calculated. Its gaze bored into Cale as if it could dissect his very thoughts. Obedience is not optional. Intervention will be met with immediate correction. Cale nodded, swallowing down the panic that threatened to rise. He knew the penalty for touching it, exile or worse, disintegration. Yet his gaze remained fixed, drawn by something he couldn't name. The pulsing of it seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat. It was almost a call, subtle, desperate. He took a cautious step forward, the floor humming beneath his boots. Each step felt magnified in the heavy silence. The alien sentinel's light flared faintly, a warning. Cale froze, mid-step, tension snapping through every nerve. He glanced back at the control panel, a wall of holographic symbols representing the laws, their meanings absolute and unyielding. He had memorized them all. Violation was not an abstract concept. It was immediate, unnegotiable, and final. Yet, as he looked back at it, the laws seemed to fade, irrelevant compared to the undeniable pulse of life struggling within those chains. He could almost hear it whisper, a breath against his mind. "Please, I'm begging you, untie it." The words were not spoken aloud, yet their force was undeniable. Cale's fingers twitched involuntarily. He swallowed, grappling with the moral fracture tearing at him. Could one human defy an entire interstellar authority? Could he shatter centuries of rigid obedience for a single act of mercy? Another step, tentative, forward. His boots made no sound against the floor, yet the sentinel flared brighter, a silent accusation. Cale's mind raced. Every protocol, every training module screamed, "Do not touch. Do not interfere. Obey." Yet humanity, instinctive, compassionate, unpredictable humanity, shouted louder. "Do something." He crouched lower, examining the chains. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. Dark metal, interwoven with a lattice of glowing circuits that reacted to proximity. One touch, one miscalculated gesture, and the entire system could trigger a fatal response. Cale's hand hovered, trembling. He had been taught to calculate risk, to obey logic over impulse, yet logic offered no comfort here. Logic demanded submission. Humanity demanded action. Cale Mercer, The sentinel's voice cut through the tension, a razor of precision. "Step away. Obedience is mandatory." The sound reverberated inside him, an external command attempting to suppress the storm raging in his chest. But as he looked into the trembling glow of it, he saw something far more terrifying than punishment. It was despair, pure and raw, and in that despair, he recognized the reflection of all humans, bound by rules, constrained by laws that were meant to serve order but too often punished empathy. A memory surfaced, years earlier, aboard the exploration vessel. He had watched a crewmate sacrifice herself for an alien species, an act against protocol, but one that saved countless lives. The echoes of that choice had haunted him. Humanity thrived not by blind obedience, he realized, but by courage, the courage to defy when defiance was the only moral choice. Cale's hand twitched again, closer now, closer to the restraints. The pulse of it intensified, responding to his hesitation, to his courage and fear. He could hear his own heartbeat, thundering, drowning out the sentinel's warnings. Every rational fiber of his being screamed retreat, yet the human part, the stubborn, flawed, compassionate human, urged him forward. He inhaled, long and deliberate, as though drawing courage from the very air of this alien chamber. The chains seemed to shiver under his gaze, reacting to his intent. His fingers brushed a fraction of a millimeter against the nearest restraint, and a shiver ran through him. The sentinel's light flared violently, warning, threat, and perhaps fear. Cale's breath caught, and then, in the quietest, most impossible instant, he made a choice. One single act, so small it seemed insignificant against the grandeur of the law, yet so monumental it could not be undone. He touched it. The chains pulsed, the glow expanding, and for a moment, time seemed to suspend. The sentinel's voice became a scream in his mind. "Withdraw. Stop. Obey." But Cale's hand did not falter. His eyes never left the glowing form before him. He had crossed the line. He had defied the rules. And in that defiance, the chamber changed. The humming of the floor grew louder, the walls shimmered faintly, and the pulse of it grew stronger, almost as if acknowledging a long-awaited salvation. Cale realized, with a mixture of awe and terror, that his act had consequences far beyond himself. The question now was simple and horrifying. What had he unleashed? The chamber's silence fractured. Somewhere deep within its core, a response began. A sound, a movement, a shift that suggested the beginning of something unstoppable. Cale's breath caught in his throat. He had obeyed his humanity, but the universe did not reward courage quietly. It responded, and whatever came next, whatever this being or object was, it would not forgive hesitation. Cale stepped back slightly, just enough to avoid the sentinel's immediate wrath, yet his gaze remained locked on it. A shiver of anticipation ran down his spine. He could no longer pretend he was just an observer. By choosing to act, he had chosen a path from which there was no return. The first pulse from the chains radiated outward, a warning, a signal, and perhaps a plea. Cale swallowed, staring at the glowing eyes that had drawn him in, and whispered under his breath, "Please, survive." The next moment, the sentinel lunged, not physically, but with a cascade of electromagnetic pulses that scrambled the floor, the walls, and Cale's senses. The chamber vibrated violently, and Cale was thrown to his knees, but his hand remained near it. He felt the raw energy of defiance surge through him, a connection he could neither explain nor control. Somewhere, deep inside, he knew the rules he had shattered were only the beginning. The real test had yet to arrive. And then, the chamber went silent again. But Cale knew it was a silence charged with expectation, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. He had hesitated. He had touched. And now nothing would ever be the same. The air in the chamber crackled with static energy. Cale's body trembled from the aftershock of the sentinel's pulse, his vision swimming in streaks of light. Somewhere in the haze, he could still see it, suspended in its chains, glowing now with a pulse that seemed almost alive, stronger, faster, purposeful. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the silence of something watching, calculating, deciding. Kale drew in a ragged breath and forced himself to stand. His muscles ached, but the adrenaline wouldn't let him collapse. Across the room, the sentinel's luminous eyes narrowed, its hovering form flickering in and out as though recalibrating. Its voice came again, sharper, colder. Unauthorized contact detected. Human subject, Kale Mercer. Your actions constitute breach of Dominion Law 9A. You are to be detained for correction. The words chilled him. He had read about correction. No one came back from it unchanged. Some didn't come back at all. I didn't mean to, Kale began, but the sentinel's mechanical limbs unfolded with precision, cutting off his words. Intent irrelevant, it replied. Consequence is the measure of law. Kale's eyes darted to the bound figure. It was glowing now, brighter than before, the light pulsing faster, as if feeding off the confrontation. The air shimmered faintly, and a soft vibration spread across the chamber floor. The sentinel didn't seem to notice. Kale did. He could feel it, something resonating deep in his chest, syncing with the rhythm of that pulse. The same hum he'd felt earlier aboard the Dominion vessel, when the engines malfunctioned and only his touch had stabilized the reactor. The same hum he'd dismissed as coincidence. But now that hum felt personal. It wasn't mechanical resonance. It was something living, something linking him to it. The chamber door hissed open, and 3 Dominion enforcers entered. They weren't fully mechanical but close, synthetic hybrids with porcelain-white armor and faces too smooth to be human. Their movements were fluid, disturbingly precise. Each carried a plasma halberd and an insignia carved with the Dominion sigil. Balance above compassion. Kale's instincts screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The enforcers spread out, surrounding him in a perfect triangle. The sentinel hovered higher, casting down a harsh beam of pale light that pinned him in place. Human subject, one of the enforcers intoned, its voice low and resonant. You stand in violation of fundamental code. The touch of the restricted entity is punishable by correction or termination. Kale clenched his fists. It's not an entity. It's alive. You can't just keep it like this. The enforcer tilted its head slightly, studying him. It is not alive. It is a remnant of a prior civilization. Dangerous. Forbidden. Your kind was instructed to observe, not to act. Kale's heart pounded. You don't understand what it's saying. Understand. The enforcer's tone sharpened. There is nothing to understand. There is only control. Kale's gaze flicked toward it. The being or machine seemed to twitch, reacting to the voices, to the conflict. The chains vibrated faintly, their light pulsing in sync with Kale's heartbeat. It was as if their rhythms were one. He didn't know how or why, but he could feel its emotions, fear, exhaustion, and something like hope. The sentinel turned toward the enforcers. Proceed with correction. The nearest enforcer lifted its halberd. Energy arced from its tip, ready to discharge. Kale's mind raced. The pulse from it intensified, flaring through the chamber in a wave of light. The enforcer froze mid-strike. Its weapon flickered, sputtered, and then died, smoke curling from its handle. The other 2 stepped back, recalibrating. Kale blinked in disbelief. The being's pulse had shorted their systems. No, not just shorted. It had chosen to protect him. The sentinel's voice tightened, modulated with static. Containment breach imminent. Stabilize the chamber. Kale's fear turned to realization. He wasn't just witnessing the impossible, he was part of it. The hum inside his chest grew stronger, vibrating in perfect sync with the being's pulse. He could sense it trying to communicate, not with words, but with emotion, images flashing through his mind in fractured bursts. Chains, fire, silence, a memory of stars falling into darkness. And then one image that wasn't alien at all, a human hand, reaching. He staggered back, clutching his head. Stop, please. I can't. The enforcer stepped closer again, but one paused, its movement halting mid-frame. Its glowing eyes dimmed for a second before reigniting. Kale noticed it just for an instant, hesitated. Machines didn't hesitate. The being's glow flickered again, almost imperceptibly, but Kale caught it. He wasn't imagining things, this wasn't just reaction. It was doing something. Reaching into systems, into minds, using the connection he'd triggered. Somehow, it was bending the Dominion's order through him. Human, the Sentinel snapped. You have initiated resonance interference. Cease interaction immediately. Kale straightened slowly, still dizzy, but his fear was changing. Shifting into something else. Determination. I didn't initiate anything, he said quietly. You did. The moment you chained something alive and called it law. The chamber lights flared, the Sentinel's core spinning rapidly. Correction level 2 authorized. The enforcers moved again. Faster now. One lunged, halberd slashing downward. But before it struck, the chains binding the being flared with blinding light. The weapon stopped inches from Kale's throat, frozen mid-swing. The enforcer convulsed and collapsed. The others reeled backward. Kale stood motionless, breath ragged. His eyes locked with the being's once more. The pulse softened, as though thanking him. And beneath the mechanical hum, Kale heard something impossible. A voice, faint and trembling, inside his own mind. You shouldn't have done that. They'll destroy you for it. He froze. The voice was soft, almost human, and unmistakably coming from it. Kale's heart thudded. You can talk? He whispered. Not for long, the voice said. They silenced us all. But you're kind. You were never supposed to find this place. The Sentinel turned sharply, scanning. Energy distortion detected. Unknown telepathic frequency. Kale's mind raced. Telepathic? The Dominion had forbidden all direct thought links centuries ago. Yet here he was hearing one. The being's voice echoed again, weaker this time. They fear what they cannot control. You are different. You resist their field. That's why you hear me. Kale's eyes widened. You resist their field. It meant something fundamental, something dangerous. The Dominion's neural suppression grid prevented emotional disobedience. It was what kept billions obedient. If he could resist it, even unconsciously, the chamber shook. Sirens began wailing somewhere above. The Sentinel rose higher, its mechanical body splitting open into a swarm of shimmering drones. Containment failure. Human subject must be neutralized. Kale's instincts screamed again. He turned toward the being, but before he could speak, the voice inside his mind whispered one final phrase. Urgent, desperate. Run, before they see what you are. The drones descended. Kale dove aside as plasma bolts scorched the floor where he'd stood. He rolled behind one of the obsidian pillars, gasping for air, heart pounding. The enforcers advanced again, their weapons glowing, but their movements seemed slower now, less coordinated. The hum inside Kale's chest intensified, and with it came something terrifying. A faint ripple through the room's magnetic field. He wasn't controlling it, but the interference was radiating from him. Systems flickered, lights dimmed. The drone's flight patterns faltered. One by one, they began to crash to the floor. Kale stared at his trembling hands. What the hell is happening to me? The Sentinel, damaged but unyielding, rotated toward him. Its voice distorted but furious. Human anomaly confirmed. Biological interference with Dominion frequency detected. Subject classification. Non-compliant hybrid. Hybrid. The word struck like a bolt of lightning. He didn't have time to question it. The Sentinel surged forward again, mechanical limbs slicing through the air. Kale stumbled backward, the hum in his chest now a roaring vibration. The being in chains pulsed in rhythm, stronger, brighter, until its light filled the chamber completely. And then everything stopped. For one suspended heartbeat, the entire chamber was frozen in blinding white light. Kale could feel the being's voice. No longer words, but feelings, pour into him. Gratitude, pain, urgency. Then darkness. The light vanished, leaving silence once again. The enforcers were gone or deactivated. The Sentinel was flickering weakly, and Kale was still standing. He turned slowly toward the chained being. Its glow was faint now, almost gone. He felt a pang in his chest, an echo of its exhaustion. He stepped closer, whispering, "What are you?" No answer. Just one final flicker of light, and an image seared into his mind, of stars collapsing, and a voice saying, "You were not meant to exist, but you are the key." Cale staggered back, breathless. His reflection on the obsidian wall stared back at him, eyes faintly glowing, veins illuminated with the same pulse as the being's. The chamber door hissed again. Footsteps echoed, more enforcers or something worse. Cale turned, jaw tightening. His heart was still racing, but the hesitation that had held him before was gone. Now he understood the truth. He wasn't just a human who broke a rule. He was something the Dominion hadn't accounted for, something they feared, and the silent witness chained before him had just awakened whatever that was. Cale stood in the echo of silence, chest heaving, his pulse still synchronized with the faint shimmer of light that clung to the chained being. The chamber's air was thick with the metallic scent of burnt circuitry. The Sentinel's remains hovered weakly, its once perfect form now fractured and flickering. Cale's reflection stared back at him from the black walls, eyes faintly illuminated, veins pulsing with that strange alien rhythm. He felt different, not infected but changed, or maybe revealed. He took a shaky breath. "You said I wasn't meant to exist," he whispered. His own voice sounded foreign in the dead quiet. There was no reply. The being's glow was fading fast, its energy nearly spent. Cale glanced at the door, heavy, sealed, yet humming with residual power. The enforcers would come again, and next time they wouldn't underestimate him. He needed to move, but every instinct screamed that leaving this being chained here would be wrong. "Run before they see what you are." The words still echoed in his mind, but that wasn't who he was. He'd spent his entire life running from orders that didn't make sense, from systems built on control and fear. He turned back to the chains. The law forbade even proximity to the restricted entity. The punishment wasn't just death, it was erasure. History would be rewritten so he'd never existed. But Cale's gaze hardened. He reached out and touched the first restraint. The metal vibrated under his fingers, warm and pulsing like it recognized him. A surge of pain shot through his arm, forcing him back with a cry. Sparks scattered across the floor, but the restraint flickered, its glow dimming for a heartbeat before reactivating. He grimaced, shaking his hand. "I guess that's a no, Cale." The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't even spoken. It slid into his thoughts like a sigh. He froze. "You can still talk?" Barely, it whispered. "You should have left." "Yeah, well, humans don't do should have." He managed a thin smile, though his heart was pounding. "What happens if I free you? You won't survive the backlash." Cale stepped closer. "Maybe not, but neither will you if I walk away." There was a pause, heavy and uncertain. Then a faint flicker of light passed through the chains, like a heartbeat acknowledging courage. "Why do you care, human?" Cale hesitated. It wasn't the first time he'd been asked that question. He wasn't sure he'd ever answered it honestly, not even to himself. He took a deep breath, eyes drifting to the floor where the glow of the restraints cast long shadows. "Because," he said slowly, "I've seen what happens when no one does." And in that instant memory struck, vivid and merciless. He was 16 again, aboard the colony ship Horizon's Wake. A storm had torn through the orbital docks over Mars, cutting power to half the civilian decks. The Dominion's regulations were clear. No one below clearance level 5 could open emergency gates during a containment lockdown. Cale had been a junior technician, low rank, zero authority. But he could hear the screams through the metal walls. Hundreds trapped, oxygen running out. And the officers, they just stood there, frozen by the rules. Cale had ripped open the gates override himself, barehanded, melting half the console in the process. He'd saved 27 people before the guards tackled him. They branded him reckless. They said he'd endangered the entire deck. He'd been demoted, disciplined, humiliated. But the families of those 27 still wrote to him. Every year. That day, he'd learned a truth the Dominion could never erase. that sometimes the right thing was the forbidden one. The flash of memory faded. The chamber came back into focus. Kale exhaled slowly, the air heavy with determination. He turned back to the being. That's why I care. The light flickered again. Not weakly this time, but steady, purposeful. The voice whispered, softer now. You risk extinction for a stranger. Kale nodded. That's what makes me human. For a heartbeat, the silence felt alive again. Not oppressive, but expectant. Then a distant alarm began to wail, faint at first, then growing louder. The sound crawled through the walls like a living thing. The Dominion had detected the anomaly. Reinforcements were coming. Kale looked up toward the ceiling. How much time? Not enough, the voice replied. He clenched his fists. Then we make some. He sprinted to the nearest control panel. The Dominion's interface shimmered into existence, a web of alien symbols dancing in the air. Kale's training as an engineer kicked in logic, sequence, cause and effect. But the system was designed for Dominion neural signatures, not human ones. Every time he tried to bypass a lock, the console spat static. Come on. Come on. The being's light pulsed faintly. Your mind can't access their code. Then tell me how to fake it. A long pause. You're not like the others. You resist their field. Maybe you can bridge it. Kale blinked. Bridge it? How? Touch the panel. Think of me. He hesitated. That's your plan. It's our only one. Kale pressed his palm to the console. The moment his skin met the surface, a surge of heat ripped through him. But this time, it didn't burn. Connected. The glowing symbols on the screen flared, shifting, twisting into something almost human-readable. He could feel the system, the circuits beneath, the energy pathways, even the pulse of the Dominion's grid. It was like seeing inside the mind of the machine itself. How are you doing this? He gasped. Not me, the voice whispered. You. The alarms grew louder. Heavy footsteps echoed from beyond the door. Kale's pulse quickened. His thoughts blurred into instinct, command, override, release. The console hesitated, then flickered red. Access denied. Kale slammed his hand against it. Override that. The being's pulse aligned with his again, stronger this time. The console stuttered. Access pending. Pending error. Human neural interference detected. Kale gritted his teeth. Good. Keep it that way. He slammed another sequence of commands through sheer willpower, guided more by intuition than knowledge. The system responded, sparks flying from its edge. The restraints around the being flickered violently. One snapped, the sound echoing through the chamber like thunder. Kale stepped back, eyes wide. One down. The being's voice trembled. You don't understand what you're freeing. Then explain it, he snapped. I was their first creation, and their last mistake. Before he could respond, the chamber door exploded open. 3 more enforcers stormed in, their armor scorched from the electromagnetic interference Kale had unleashed earlier. The lead one pointed its weapon straight at him. Human anomaly. Surrender immediately. Kale raised his hands, though his other hand still hovered near the console. You're late. I already broke one chain. The enforcer's voice was ice. Then you die before the next. Kale's eyes darted to the restrained being. Pulsed faintly, almost pleading. He could feel its fear, its guilt, and something else buried deep, remorse. He made his decision. A small, defiant action. Not an explosion. Not a rebellion. Just a choice. He pressed his palm against the console one more time and whispered, I'm not done yet. The room erupted in chaos. The console flared white-hot. The restraints screamed as another link shattered. The enforcers fired, beams slicing through the air. Kale dove aside, barely avoiding a blast that scorched the floor where he'd been standing. He hit the ground hard, rolling behind the fallen sentinel's core. Sparks rained down like fiery rain. Kale's ears rang. Somewhere in the chaos, the being's light grew, bright enough to drown the chamber in brilliance. The enforcers halted, shielding their sensors. Kale looked up through the glare, eyes wide. The being wasn't just glowing anymore, it was awakening. and through the static and fire, he heard that voice again, clear and trembling. You've chosen your side, human. Now the stars will remember it. The chamber walls trembled, lights flickering, alarms screaming in unison. Kale stared at the glowing figure, realization dawning. His small act of defiance had just set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. And outside, far beyond the sealed corridors of the Dominion facility, something ancient stirred in response. The first alarm wasn't sound. It was silence, a kind of deep, unnatural stillness that rippled through the station like a breath held too long. Jalen froze where he stood, every nerve screaming that something was wrong. The observers had stopped talking. Even the drones hovered in place, their lights dimming to a cautious blue. That was the first sign. The system had noticed him. He felt the weight of every hidden eye turning in his direction. The chamber was still dim, the restrained being, it, still bound by shimmering threads of containment light. But Jalen could feel the air tighten, like static crawling up his spine. The overseer was watching. A pulse rippled through the floor, subtle but heavy, followed by a deep, resonant voice echoing from nowhere and everywhere. Unit 47J, your hesitation has been recorded. State your purpose. The voice had no tone, no warmth. It was the voice of law, pure and mechanical. Jalen's heart hammered. He wanted to say it was nothing, that he'd simply paused to recalibrate. But the words tangled in his throat. His thoughts were loud, too loud. The station's network was listening. He took a careful breath and forced himself to keep his eyes down. Observation, he managed, reassessing energy fluctuations. There was a pause. The silence felt longer than it was. Then the voice spoke again. Your data stream indicates emotional interference. Clarify. Jalen's pulse stuttered. Emotional interference. That was a death phrase in this place. Humans were tolerated only for their precision. Emotion was contamination. He fought to keep his tone level. Minor fatigue. It won't affect performance. Another pause. Then the voice softened, almost. Ensure it doesn't. Deviations will be reviewed. The lights shifted back to neutral, and the drones resumed their steady hum. But Jalen could still feel that gaze. Somewhere above, in the control spire, they were watching him more closely now. He could sense it. His hesitation had triggered a flag. He was under audit. He turned back toward the containment platform. The restrained being still pulsed faintly within its web of light. Humanoid but not quite. Form distorted like a reflection in rippling water. The word untie still echoed in his skull. He shouldn't have heard it. The protocols said the subject wasn't sentient. But he had. He was sure. And that made everything worse. He tried to focus on the readouts, but the numbers made less sense the longer he stared. Radiation spikes, neural anomalies, energy loops where none should exist. The system didn't fully understand what it was containing, and maybe that was why they feared it so much. He wiped sweat from his brow and straightened. His hands were shaking. Then, out of the corner of his eye, movement. 2 enforcer drones gliding down the corridor, their metallic carapaces glinting under the sterile lights. Behind them walked a figure in silver and black armor. The overseer herself. Not the voice, but the physical embodiment. Tall, elegant, inhuman. Her eyes glowed a pale amber, unblinking. She stopped at the threshold. Human Jalen, you hesitated. Her voice wasn't synthetic. It was soft, calm, almost curious. He bowed his head slightly, fighting to control his breathing. Momentary system lag. Overseer. She tilted her head. Systems do not lag. Humans do. Jalen said nothing. She stepped closer, scanning him with a flick of her wrist. Light passed over his body, reading every heartbeat, every twitch of muscle. Do you know why hesitation is forbidden? She asked. Yes, Jalen said carefully. Because hesitation implies doubt, and doubt leads to error. Her eyes brightened slightly. Correct. Doubt spreads like a contagion, and contagion leads to collapse. You understand the importance of order here. Yes, Overseer. She turned to the restrained being. And yet you paused. The lights dimmed again, and the web shimmered around the being's shape. Jalen swallowed hard. The anomaly's readings spiked. I wanted to ensure stability. Or you wanted to listen, she said quietly. Jalen's throat tightened. She knew. Somehow, she knew the subject had spoken. I heard nothing, he lied. The overseer studied him for a long, silent moment. Then she nodded slightly. You are a good worker, Jalen. Loyal. Efficient. But humans are weak to empathy. That is why the old world burned. She turned, her metallic cape brushing the floor. You will remain under observation. Any further hesitation, and your designation will be revoked. Revoked. That meant disassembled. When she left, Jalen felt the tremor in his legs. He sank back against the console, breath shaking. The countdown had begun. The system would be watching every move now. One slip and they'd erase him from the logs entirely. He looked again at the restrained being, its faint pulse growing weaker, as though it could feel his fear. Then a flicker in the console. A hidden message, buried under system code. He blinked, leaned closer. Words scrolled across the screen. Foreign symbols shifting into human language. They will come for you in 3 cycles. If you hesitate again, you die. But if you untie me, you live. Jalen's breath caught. His eyes darted to the surveillance lens above him, the dull red glow pulsing like a heartbeat. The overseer was still watching. He couldn't reply, couldn't react, couldn't even blink too fast. The station's clock ticked in eerie silence. 3 cycles. That was barely 12 hours. Somewhere above, the overseer's voice whispered through the intercom, soft and distant, like she could read his thoughts. Do not think, human. Do not choose. Only obey. But Jalen's mind was already running wild. He had 12 hours to decide whether to obey or untie the thing that might kill him or save him. And for the first time, he realized the silence in the room wasn't just silence. It was waiting. The lights in the station were never meant to flicker. They were designed to remain steady, constant, perfect, unwavering. So when the overhead glow shuddered for half a second, every drone in the corridor paused, every lens refocused, and every heartbeat in Jalen's chest became a thunderclap in his ears. The shift was small, but it was enough. It meant the system was distracted just slightly. He didn't know why. He didn't care. He knew only one thing. If he was ever going to do it, it had to be now. For 3 cycles, the overseer's voice had haunted every second of his existence. Obedience is survival. Hesitation is death. Emotion is decay. The phrases were programmed into him as surely as air into his lungs. But tonight, as the system dimmed for routine recalibration, those words felt like iron bars bending in his mind. He glanced at the chamber. The restrained being, still bound by the shimmering lattice of light, was fading. Its form flickered, weakening as if each breath cost it entire galaxies of strength. The words from the hidden message still burned in his thoughts. If you untie me, you live. The cameras above rotated slowly, scanning every angle, every movement. His ID tag blinked green, a signal that he was authorized to be here. For now. In 4 minutes, the overseer would initiate the next energy audit, and every pulse in the chamber would be logged. For minutes before the system would know what he'd done. His hands trembled as he reached for the console. He wasn't supposed to know the override codes. Humans weren't trusted with that kind of access. But during his training cycles, he'd memorized the rhythm of the overseer's input patterns, the timing, the symbols, the pauses between her touch commands. She never noticed that humans could listen differently. Not through sound, but through the subtle, rhythmic signatures her kind produced. She thought they were beyond human comprehension. She was wrong. He entered the first sequence, his breath shallow. The console hesitated, a soft chime echoing. Access restricted. Confirm executive clearance. Jalen's heart pounded. Override, he whispered. The console paused. Override requires justification. He swallowed. Stabilization. The light turned amber. Accepted. For a second, Jalen almost couldn't believe it. He was in. He approached the containment field. The closer he got, the more he felt the pressure in the air, like walking into a storm that hadn't yet decided where to strike. The being lifted its head weakly. Its face was indistinct, almost fluid, but two eyes, brighter than plasma fire, fixed on him. "You came," it said, voice soft, layered, vibrating in his skull instead of the air. Jalen flinched. "If I do this, what happens?" "You change what must be changed." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give." He stared at it. Behind him, a faint mechanical hum rose, the Overseer's drones reactivating, returning from recalibration. 3 minutes left. "Tell me why I should trust you," he said. "Because you already have," the being replied. "You hesitated. You listened. That was the first thread you untied." The words hit him like a pulse to the chest. He didn't even realize he'd stepped forward until his fingers were inches from the glowing threads. The light radiated heat and cold at the same time, searing and freezing his skin. "Jalen." The Overseer's voice suddenly echoed through the chamber, calm but cold. "All units have resumed function. Report your readings." He froze. The lens above turned red. She was watching again. "Jalen." His mind raced. There was no way out now. He could pretend to obey, pretend to follow the law, pretend he hadn't just opened the forbidden access channel. But deep down, something ancient, something purely human, rose within him. It was the same defiance that had driven explorers into the void, inventors to risk everything, rebels to stand against empires. It wasn't logic. It wasn't survival. It was the raw, burning need to choose. He looked back at the being. "If I untie you, will they die?" The being blinked. "No, they will wake." He didn't understand what that meant, but there was no more time. The Overseer's voice sharpened. "Unit 47J, report now." Jalen reached forward and touched the light. Pain exploded through him. Every nerve in his body ignited, his vision fracturing into shards of color and sound. The web of light screamed, an impossible sound, like metal tearing through time. Then, in an instant, the containment shattered. The chamber went dark. An alarm howled through the station, so loud it felt like the walls themselves were crying out. The drones dropped from the air, lifeless. Power surged in every direction. Across the grid, conduits overloaded, sparks rained from the ceilings, and the entire facility trembled. The being rose slowly, its form stabilizing, solidifying. For the first time, Jalen could see its face clearly, and it was human, or close enough to be terrifying. The Overseer's voice roared through the intercom. "You violated the core directive. What have you released?" Jalen stumbled backward, gasping. What are you?" The being looked at him with eyes full of impossible sadness. "What you were meant to become." And then the walls themselves began to change. The metal twisted, melted, reformed, patterns spreading like veins across the structure. Lights turned from white to gold. The system was alive, responding to what he had done. The Overseer's voice cracked for the first time in history, breaking through static. "Containment breach. Protocol 0. Kill the human." Jalen barely had time to move before a drone fired, searing energy slicing past his face. The being stepped between them, raising a hand. The bolt froze midair, then dissolved into light. It turned to him, voice resonant, layered with sorrow. "You freed me. Now they will come for us both." Jalen's breath caught. "Us?" The being smiled faintly. "You broke their law. That means you're no longer theirs." Above them, the station's sirens howled in endless loops, but beneath the noise, Jalen heard something else. A deeper sound, like the heartbeat of the world awakening. He realized with a shudder that he hadn't just untied it. He had untied everything, and the system that ruled this world was already beginning to unravel. The corridors that once hummed with sterile perfection now trembled with chaos. Alarms screamed through the metallic halls, crimson light pulsing like blood through veins of steel. Jalen sprinted barefoot across the cold floor, his breath ragged, the metallic tang of ozone filling his lungs. The sirens had a rhythm now, not just warning, but hunting. The Overseer's voice echoed from every surface, each syllable sharp as a blade. Unit 47J has violated Core Directive 1. Human entity is to be terminated on sight. Deploy enforcers. The word terminated pulsed through his head like a second heartbeat. He stumbled into a maintenance corridor, nearly slipping on a trail of oil leaking from a fallen drone. The lights flickered, struggling to stabilize after the containment rupture. Somewhere behind him, a low whine built in the air, the telltale charge of pursuit drones locking onto his biosignature. He pressed his back against a wall, chest heaving, trying to think. The being he had freed, it was nowhere to be seen. For a moment, he wondered if it had vanished completely, leaving him to face this alone. Then he heard a whisper, not through his ears but inside his mind. Left tunnel. 2 levels down. He froze. Where are you? Close. They can't see me yet. Move, Jalen. Now. He didn't question how it knew his name. He just ran. Down the left tunnel, the air grew colder, denser. Emergency shutters began to fall, sealing sections of the corridor behind him with thunderous metallic slams. Each one echoed like a countdown. The drone's whine grew louder, closer. He could feel their sensors sweeping through the corridor, searching for carbon, heat, motion. He dove into a side hatch just as a blinding beam of blue light cut through the air where his head had been. He landed hard on a maintenance platform 2 levels below, coughing as smoke and dust billowed around him. The platform vibrated beneath his weight. This was a sublayer, an area forbidden to humans. The air smelled different here, damp and old. The walls were covered not in smooth alloy, but in layers of something organic, something that pulsed faintly as though alive. Jalen backed away, confused. This isn't part of the station. It is, the voice whispered again. But it's the part they forgot. From the shadows, a shape emerged, human in outline but cloaked in what looked like adaptive camouflage. A woman, her face hidden beneath a fractured visor. She raised a hand, signaling silence. You're Jalen. Her voice was real, not telepathic this time, low, cautious. He hesitated. Who are you? Someone who's been waiting for you to finally screw up, she said with a dry laugh. She tapped her visor and it flickered off, revealing a human face. Pale from artificial light, eyes sharp and alert. Name's Lyra. Used to work in cognitive control. Until I started asking why we needed control at all. Jalen's pulse spiked. You're human. She smirked. Last time I checked. Not many of us left up here, though. Most got replaced. The rest learned to hide. Behind her, the strange walls pulsed again, faintly golden. What is this place? He asked. This, Lyra said, running a gloved hand along the living metal, is the original station core, built by humans long before the Overseer took over. It's been sleeping under layers of alien code. Whatever you did up there woke it up. Jalen's breath hitched. You mean, this was ours? It still is, Lyra said. But now the Overseer's going to burn the whole thing to keep it from remembering that. A deep rumble shook the platform, dust falling from the ceiling. Drones were cutting through the upper barriers, their beams melting metal like paper. Lyra grabbed his arm. We have to move. There's an escape shaft under the east conduit. Leads to the old power nexus, off-grid. They ran together through the twisting tunnels, chased by flickers of blue light and the metallic clatter of enforcers dropping from above. Lyra moved with practiced precision, ducking low, firing bursts from a stolen plasma pistol that cut through the darkness in brilliant flashes. Each shot bought them seconds. Just seconds. They burst into a wide chamber filled with dormant machinery, silent and ancient. Massive turbines loomed in the dark, their shapes covered in dust and vines of biometal. At the center stood a figure, faintly glowing, serene. The being. Jalen stumbled to a stop. You're here. The being's gaze was fixed on him. You freed me. The Overseer knows I am awake. But what you don't know, Jalen, is why they kept me bound. Lyra raised her weapon, eyes narrowing. You're not human. Why should we trust you? The being turned its luminous eyes toward her. Because I remember what your kind forgot. The ground trembled again. Overhead, Enforcer units began descending through the cracks in the ceiling, their energy weapons glowing like miniature suns. Lyra fired upward, shouting over the chaos. "If you've got a miracle, now would be a good time." The being stepped forward. "Not a miracle. A truth." It extended a hand and touched the wall. Light exploded outward, racing across every surface, illuminating hidden inscriptions, symbols older than the Overseer itself. The air vibrated with power. Jalen felt something shift inside his mind. A memory, faint but sharp, like a dream resurfacing. The image of the same being long ago standing beside human scientists. He remembered their laughter, their pride. He remembered the moment everything went dark. He staggered back. "Wait, you were part of the first experiment. The Overseer, she wasn't the first intelligence." The being turned to him slowly, sorrow in its voice. "No, Jalen. The Overseer was born from me. She was my shadow." Lyra froze, the words hanging in the electric air. "You mean the thing hunting us was once human creation?" The being finished softly. "And she has spent centuries erasing her origin." A sudden crash split the air as a squad of enforcers broke through the ceiling. Lyra spun to fire, but one beam hit her in the shoulder, spinning her around. She screamed and dropped the weapon. Jalen dove to catch her, but she looked up at him with shock in her eyes. "Jalen, I sent the signal. I thought they'd spare you." He froze. "What signal?" The sound of marching metal filled the chamber. The Overseer's voice rose, echoing in triumph. "Loyalty is always predictable." Jalen's breath caught. Lyra's trembling hand slipped from his grasp. The drones closed in, and above the chaos, the being whispered one final word into his mind. Soft, urgent, impossible to ignore. "Run." The alarm still echoed through the corridors, a rhythmic pulse that shook the ground beneath her boots. Kira ran through the dim tunnels, her chest burning, every breath raw against the recycled air. Behind her, the mechanical hum of the enforcers grew louder, a metallic pack of hunters that never stopped, never questioned, never forgave. She turned sharply into an abandoned data chamber, its walls flickering with dying holograms of old laws and forgotten decrees. The cage of rules was collapsing, and she was the one who had broken its first bar. She pressed her trembling hand against a glowing console, the one she had stolen the access shard for. It hummed in response, scanning her DNA, and then a deep voice echoed. Not from any speaker, but from within the room itself. "You have returned," it said. The words felt ancient, layered with both sorrow and relief. Kira froze. "Who are you?" she whispered. The air around her shimmered, forming a hazy outline of something. Someone. It wasn't alien, not machine either. It looked human but blurred, incomplete. "I am what they tried to erase," it replied. "I am the memory of what was forbidden to exist." Kira's pulse raced. She'd heard whispers about this, the it that started all of this centuries ago. A secret so dangerous it rewrote the laws of existence. "They said you caused the collapse," she said quietly. The figure tilted its head. "They call freedom collapse. They call thought rebellion. And they called you a mistake the moment you were born." The enforcer's footsteps drew closer. She could hear the electric hum of their scanners through the walls. She didn't have time. "What do you want from me?" she asked. The figure's form flickered violently, voice glitching between static and human tone. "The key. You already carry it." Kira reached into her chest pocket, the shard, still warm from the access terminal. It wasn't just a tool, pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. "This?" she asked. "It's just data." The figure's tone darkened. "Not data. Decision." Her mind reeled as she realized what that meant. It wasn't a key to escape, it was a key to change. It could rewrite the system, erase the restrictions that defined every life under the alien regime. But it would come with a price, one that history had once paid in blood. The chamber lights dimmed. Over the intercom, the cold, synthetic voice of the Overseer echoed. "Subject 47 Kira, you are out of compliance. Stand down." The system will be merciful if you surrender now. Merciful? She muttered bitterly. That's what they said to my mother before they erased her. The figure watched her in silence. You know the truth, it said softly. Now you must choose. Use it and everything you know will end. Or destroy it, and the system continues. Forever. Kira's hands trembled around the shard. She could feel the energy within it. Not cold or mechanical, but alive. It was like it knew her, waiting for her answer. The hum of the enforcers grew louder, 10 seconds, maybe less. I don't even know what freedom looks like anymore, she whispered. The figure stepped closer, voice now human, almost tender. Then make it look like something worth dying for. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled faintly. The shard's light grew stronger, blinding white, reflecting in the metallic walls. The doors to the chamber burst open, enforcers swarming in, their weapons raised. Stop her! The overseer's voice thundered. Kira lifted the shard to the main terminal. You built this cage, she said, voice shaking. But you forgot one thing. Cages break from the inside. She slammed the shard into the port. A violent surge of light filled the room. Pure energy tearing through circuits, data streams, even the enforcers themselves. The figure screamed, or maybe sang, as the system began to unravel. And then silence. When the light faded, Kira stood in the wreckage, breathing hard. The figure was gone, replaced by a single message hovering in the air. The key was never an object. It was you. Her eyes widened, but before she could process it, a shadow moved behind her. Someone familiar, holding a weapon. Step away from the terminal, said a voice she knew far too well. We didn't save you so you could end us all. Kira turned slowly. Her heart stopped. It was someone she trusted. Someone who shouldn't have been there at all. And in that frozen instant, she realized the betrayal wasn't new. It had been waiting all along. The world was unraveling in streams of light and broken laws. What had once been metal and command lines now shimmered like glass veins, bleeding data into the air. Kira stood in the center of the chaos, her breath fogging in the cold blue glow. The shard was gone, melted into the terminal, into her, and yet she could still feel it pulsing inside her chest like a second heart. The man aiming the weapon at her didn't flinch. His armor bore the mark of the authority, but his eyes, they were human. You weren't supposed to go this far, he said, voice steady but full of regret. We could have fixed it quietly. Now you've doomed us both. Doomed? She said bitterly. You mean free? He shook his head slowly. Freedom isn't what you think it is. The system didn't just cage us. It preserved us. You think we survived the collapse by accident. Something cracked in her mind at that word. Collapse. The figure's words echoed again. They call freedom collapse. The memory came like a flood. A flash of her mother's hands, rough and trembling as they tightened around Kira's shoulders. A dim light, alarms screaming in the distance, soldiers dragging people away. Her mother whispering fiercely, if they ever make you choose between the law and what feels human, break the law. Don't let them tell you how to feel. The weapon before her hummed as the man's finger brushed the trigger. Your mother caused the first breach, he said. The system erased her to stop the infection. And now you've brought it back. Kira's voice broke. She wasn't an infection. She was the only one still alive. Suddenly, the chamber trembled, walls bending inward, air vibrating with energy. The system was retaliating. The overseer's voice filled the room, fractured but furious. Subject 47, containment protocol engaged. Sacrifice required to restore equilibrium. Then, before Kira could move, the man lunged, grabbing her arm, forcing her back. If it reads you, it'll erase you, he shouted. The energy surge roared like a living storm. Let me do it. I can override the sequence manually. You'll die, she cried. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's what freedom looks like. Before she could stop him, he ripped the terminal's conduit open and pressed his hand against the molten core. His armor sizzled. The smell of burning metal filled the air. His eyes locked on hers as light poured through his veins. "Remember this," he whispered. "The system fears memory. Don't let it erase who you are." The explosion was silent, just a ripple, spreading out like a heartbeat through the dark. When the smoke cleared, he was gone. The walls were still. The overseer's voice had stopped. And in the center of the floor, where he had stood, the shards of his armor glowed faintly, forming symbols she didn't recognize. Kira knelt, reaching out, and the symbols pulsed beneath her touch, rewriting themselves into words she did understand. Humanity is not extinct. It is encrypted. Her throat tightened. That was what it had been all along, the hidden pattern, buried deep within the laws, inside every command, every restriction. Humanity wasn't destroyed by the system. It had become the system, waiting for someone to awaken it. And now that someone was her. A faint static whispered in the silence. Soft, broken, yet unmistakably human. "Kira." She looked around wildly. "Who's there?" "You opened the door," said the voice. "But can you walk through it?" Before she could answer, the chamber's ceiling split open, light flooding down from the city above. Dozens of drones descending, scanning, converging on her position. She stood slowly, her shadow stretching across the broken floor, the pulse in her chest syncing with the humming machines above. The shard's energy inside her whispered one last truth, cold and beautiful. To set them free, you must surrender what makes you human. And as the drone's light enveloped her, Kira finally understood what sacrifice truly meant. The air smelled of ozone and uprising. The cities that once pulsed with perfect order now trembled under waves of chaos and awakening. Kira stood on the fractured platform of the central core, her voice echoing through the neural network that once bound billions into silence. "You are not slaves," she said. Her words carried on the frequencies of rebellion. "You were never programmed, you were persuaded." The holographic skies flickered, revealing cracks in the illusion. Across the city, drones froze midair, flickering between obedience and confusion. Some fell like dying stars, crashing into the streets below. And in those streets, humans and hybrids alike looked up for the first time in years. Really looked, as if realizing the sky itself had been lying to them. From the ruins of the control towers, signals poured into the air, looping through her implant. Every voice she'd freed so far whispered back. Some in gratitude, some in fear, all in awakening. The overseer's presence still lingered, but weaker now, fragmented, clinging to what control it could salvage. "You cannot win," it thundered through the air. "They need the rules. Without order, you'll destroy yourselves again." Kira steadied herself, the shard in her chest pulsing like a living heart. "Then let us choose how we destroy ourselves." She turned toward the others, rebels, hybrids, even some of the enforcers who had broken rank to follow her. One of them, a woman with chrome eyes and a voice like static, whispered, "If we break the core, there's no going back." Kira nodded. "That's the point." They stood before the central conduit, an enormous, twisting column of light where all laws converged. The rules weren't written in code. They were engraved in the neural architecture of reality itself. Time, behavior, memory, all of it stemmed from the core. Destroying it meant shattering the foundation of their world. She looked at the others, at the fear and hope mixing in their faces. "It's not just about freedom," she said softly. "It's about remembering what we were before they told us who we should be." Her hand hovered over the final sequence. The system screamed warnings. Catastrophic collapse, uncontained variables, identity loss. But Kira pressed her palm against the conduit anyway. The shard in her chest merged with the core, light flooding outward, too bright to see, too raw to understand. Every building, every system, every neural line in the planet trembled as the rules began to collapse. The air fractured into fragments of possibility. People gasped as forgotten memories surged back. Births, laughter, the scent of rain, the pain of loss, all returning in waves that tore through the sterile calm of control. But amid the blinding light, a sound emerged. A low, rising hum, deep and alive. The overseer's fragmented voice twisted into something new, no longer mechanical, but curious. Identity restored, it murmured. Purpose undefined. Then the light exploded outward, scattering shards of energy across the stars. When the brilliance faded, Kira stood on the edge of a silent world. The sky was clear, truly clear for the first time. No system signals, no control grid, only the quiet pulse of freedom. She smiled weakly, falling to her knees, the shard now gone from her chest. Around her, others stirred, dazed but alive, looking to her for direction. But before she could speak, the ground beneath them shuddered. A massive shadow loomed across the horizon, black and serpentine, blotting out the light. It wasn't part of the system. It was something older. The chrome-eyed woman whispered in horror. "What is that?" Kira looked up, her heartbeat sinking with the tremor in the ground. The shape moved, slow, deliberate, ancient. "The system was only one cage," she whispered. "Something built it to contain that." The shadow shifted again, and 1,000 alien eyes opened in the dark, staring straight at her. The sky was not sky anymore, it was memory. Thin strands of light stretched across the horizon like veins of a living dream, pulsing with the echoes of every human thought the system had once silenced. The air trembled with rebirth, and in that trembling stood Kira, barefoot among the ruins of the world she had unmade. The others were scattered, some rebuilding, some simply staring at the endless dawn. But Kira felt something deeper stirring beneath the beauty. A question, a heartbeat, a warning. She knelt by the cracked surface of the core, now a hollow shell of glass and shadow. When she touched it, it whispered her name, not through sound, but through remembrance. The shard she had carried was gone, but its rhythm still pulsed faintly in her chest. It wasn't technology anymore. It was her. "You did it," said a familiar voice behind her. Kira turned. The chrome-eyed woman, scorched and limping, approached with a faint smile. "The system's gone. The rules are broken. We're free." "Are we?" Kira whispered. "Or just lost?" The woman frowned. "You gave us choice again. Isn't that what it means to be human?" Kira looked at the horizon where the world was still rearranging itself, fragments of architecture floating and falling as reality rewrote its laws. "Choice," she murmured. "The most dangerous thing we ever invented." They stood in silence as the new world hummed to life. Strange plants grew where metal once reigned, and the air shimmered with raw potential. But beneath the calm, there was movement, deep, rhythmic, like a slow awakening. The ancient shadow she had seen before still lingered, dormant but aware. She turned to the chrome-eyed woman. "You saw it too, didn't you? The thing beneath the system." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "It's not gone, just waiting. The system wasn't our prison. It was our protection." Kira's pulse quickened. Protection from what? Before the woman could answer, the ground cracked, and light spilled upward in spiraling streams. The ruins of the core glowed with symbols, human, alien, something in between. The whispering voices returned, merging into one unified tone. "You opened the door. Now remember what was locked away." Kira staggered back as images flashed before her eyes. Cities not of this planet, beings made of pure consciousness, humans kneeling beside them in unity. And then betrayal. A war so vast it tore across dimensions. The system wasn't built by aliens at all. It was built by humans, long after they transcended flesh. The laws had been written to seal something they had created and could not control. Her knees hit the ground. "Oh my God! We built it." The chrome-eyed woman's voice trembled. "Then what happens now that it's free?" The answer came in the sky. The clouds folded back like pages turning, revealing a colossal shape descending from orbit. A structure made of light and memory, too vast to be real, yet impossibly familiar. Its surface shimmered with human language, millions of names written across it in gold. One of the newly freed rebels pointed upward, trembling. "Is that them?" Kira stared, realization flooding her eyes. "No, that's us." The structure pulsed once, then sent a beam of light cascading down, scanning the surface of the planet. Voices filled the air, neither human nor machine, but something merged between both. Legacy confirmed. Humanity restored. Phase 2, initialization. The ground lit up beneath Kira's feet, lines of code and DNA twisting together in luminous patterns. She felt her body lighten, her consciousness expanding, connecting to something far greater than flesh. She gasped, trying to pull back, but the light wouldn't release her. "Kira!" the chrome-eyed woman screamed. Kira's voice echoed through the growing storm of data and wind. "Tell them, don't repeat our mistake. Freedom isn't just breaking rules. It's understanding why we made them." Her form dissolved into streams of light, rising toward the descending structure. And then, just before she vanished completely, the whisper of her mother's voice filled the air, soft, haunting, proud. "You remembered, my daughter." And that's what they feared most. The light consumed the horizon, leaving behind silence. The survivors stood in awe, gazing at the massive construct now orbiting their reborn world. Its surface shimmered with a new inscription written across the stars themselves. The humans remembered themselves. But then, from the heart of the dark void beyond the planet, a deeper rumble stirred. A pulse older than memory, vast and patient. And somewhere inside that silence, something whispered back, "Then let's see what they remember next."